I grew up in a little small town called Brainerd in the middle of a state called Minnesota, which is pronounced Minnesota, in case you're wondering. And the people call it like, they call it the Gopher State. I don't know if you knew this about Minnesota. They call it the Gopher State. But actually, they should call it the Ophir State because we say things like, if something's attractive, you say, oh, for cute. Or if something's like really like cold, like, oh, for cold. Or we say, everything's oh for everything. So I'm like this small town, kind of, that's where I grew up. Last week, though, 2 weekends ago, I was down in the Twin Cities with St. Paul and Minneapolis, and there's this band that was traveling, it's been traveling around the country, traveling around the United States, as well as the world, and I got the chance to be downtown Minneapolis when this little band called One Direction was in town. Have you guys ever heard of One Direction, right? So I have these friends, and these family friends, they all wanted to see One Direction, but they didn't have tickets because tickets have been sold out for a year. They sold out in 15 minutes. Been sold for a year. So this friend of mine, again, family friend goes way back, was like, okay, Father Mike, here's what you have to do. Whenever I send you a text message, you need to call the radio station and just keep calling them until we want to win tickets. I'm like, fine, whatever. I want to help you. I'm a good friend. So I'm calling, they're not winning. I'm calling, they're not winning. So it's the day of the concert. They still don't have tickets. So like, Father Mike, will you drive us downtown Minneapolis? Because we think if we show up, then One Direction will be there and hand us out tickets. I'm like, fine. So I have nothing else to do. I work 1 hour a week, so that's kind of what we do as priests. So I got plenty of time. So I'm driving downtown Minneapolis, and I'm driving around this place called, the arena called the Target Center, where One Direction is going to play. Now, I know One Direction is not there because my family friend's been telling us that, no, Harry's in LA, he's still there, and whoever Zane is over in whatever, and Lewis and Liam, and I know all their names, which is really weird. They're not here, but there are all these girls all around the Target Center waiting for them to show up. And there's these buses there, and so the girls will walk up to the bus and they knock, maybe they're just hanging out in their tour bus, because what else would you do on a 100-degree day in downtown Minneapolis? Let's hang out on the bus, not inside. So even though they're tweeting and telling everybody that they're not there yet. So I'm driving around, drop my friends off so they can go see if they can get tickets. And I noticed something happen. At one point, all these girls are waiting, and this barrier falls over. And this guy who works there goes to pick up the barrier. And I noticed about maybe 4 or 5 girls rushed over and started picking up the barrier. And now I have to think that they probably did this because they're very kind and generous people. But I also know that if they're anything like me, they also did it because they thought, maybe if I go and help right now, and they see me pick up this barrier, someone will say, you seem like a nice young lady. Here's some free backstage passes to One Direction. Here's tickets for supper with them tonight. I want to be seen. I want someone to see me doing well. Last night, Jackie was talking about Zacchaeus, right? And Zacchaeus climbed up the tree because he wanted to see Jesus, but she also made the point that Jesus first climbed up the tree of the cross because he wanted to see us. Sometimes we want to be seen. Sometimes we don't want to be seen. But there's a kind of a thing, and in that is I want to get caught sometimes. I don't always want to get caught. This is very important, I think, to make a distinction of. I don't always want to get caught because the other day, again, I was driving through the back roads of Minnesota, going from my parents' place that live on a lake back to work. I had to get back in time to Duluth, where I'm from, for Mass. And so I might have been speeding just a little bit over the speed limit. And so I'm driving along, and I got to get there for Mass. So I look up, and there's a state trooper coming right at me. I'm like, no. So, I saw him in my rear view. He turned around, and so I just pulled over. He didn't have to turn his lights on. I'm like, I'm caught. You saw me. So I pull over to the side, and I'm sitting there. I get my driver's license registration out. They're up there on the steering wheel, so I'm ready to go when he pulls up. And he walks up to me, and he says, oh, I see you're all ready. I'm like, yes, officer. He says, so do you know how fast you were going? I said, probably about 75. I said, it's 55 here. Yes, officer. And he said, actually, that's pretty honest to you because I only got you doing 73. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with him. Why? Because I was caught. I was totally busted. I was doing the wrong thing, and he caught me doing the wrong thing. I did not want to get caught doing the wrong thing, but I was caught doing the wrong thing, so here I am. I'm like, yeah, he says, so you live in Duluth? I'm like, yes, I live in Duluth. What are you heading back for? I said, this will sound weird. I'm going to church. I know that sounds strange. He's like, no, I believe you. So what do you do? So I'm just coming from my parents' lake, right? And it's 95 degrees. So I'm just wearing shorts and some sandals. I'm like, I know I don't look like, I'm a priest. Oh, I believe you. Like, really? You pull over a lot of priests with their shorts on? So he goes back to his car, and he goes back, and about maybe 3 minutes later, he comes back to my car, and he says, I wasn't going to give you a ticket, but I saw that you've had quite a few warnings in the last year. Like, yeah, it's true. It's true, officer. But then he said, you know what? Normally, on the third warning, it's a ticket automatically. Third warning, you get a ticket, you're done. But you know what? The state is going to give you some grace today. Here's just a warning, and just drive the speed limit from now on. I'm like, oh, I thought it was really cool, that he said, the state's going to give you some grace. I'm like, hey, that's what I do. Through Jesus, gives the grace to the church. So I didn't do that. I was just like, thanks, bro. So I pull away. The whole rest of the time, I was late for Mass. Why? Because I had to drive the speed limit the rest of the way. And then that night, I had to go on a long trip up to northern Minnesota, driving the speed limit. I was really frustrated by this. The whole next couple days, I had to drive all over the state of Minnesota, but I had to drive the speed limit. I'm like, no, why? Because I'm very grateful that this guy gave me grace. I'm extremely grateful that he was willing to say, you know what, listen, I'm not going to bust you. I'm actually going to give you this gift. And I wanted to repay him for the gift that he gave me. But I don't know about you. I discovered it's really, really hard to go the speed limit. Like, I had to keep making the intentional decision of like, no, I'm accustomed to not going 20 miles an hour over this. That was really wrong. I know that now. But even just a little bit over the speed limit, he said, no, the speed limit is 55. That means the maximum is 55. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm doing this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this out of gratitude for the grace that he gave me. But I found myself looking for cops, not looking for cops so they wouldn't catch me. I was looking for cops so that they would catch me. Like, I ended up becoming resentful of the fact that for the rest of those next couple 4 or 5 days, I was driving everywhere and I did not see one police officer. Like, this is so ridiculous. I'm doing the right thing. Why aren't you notice? Like, and then if I thought I would actually pass a cop, that he'd, like, you know, go by me and go like, hey, nice job. Well done. That grace wasn't wasted on you. Like, no, officer, it wasn't. As like an old lady in a walker passes me because I'm going so slow. But I found myself, I was so grateful for the grace, but then I found myself resenting the whole thing because, well, do you even notice that I'm now living a different life? Do you even notice that now I'm actually obeying the law? I wanted to get caught doing the right thing. And the question would come back, you know, does anyone even notice? Does anyone even care that I'm doing the right thing? Does it make a difference? You know, that kind of thing. The question comes back. Does it even make a difference that now I'm trying to live a different life? Because it's costing me valuable, precious seconds of my life. Because I can't go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit now. So does anyone care? Does anyone notice? You know, what difference does my life make? What difference does my choice on a daily basis make? You say, look at this test. Well, what difference does it make if I cheat a little bit on this test? Gossiping someone, what difference does it make if I just tell that little piece of gossip? I mean, it's true, for crying out loud. Does it really even matter? Does it even make a difference if I'm grateful for what God has done, but does he even notice? Does he even care? Does it even make a difference if I try to live this different life? I mean, think about the gospel today. It's the parable of the weeds and the wheat. Here's the landowner, God, who plants the seed with great wheat that's growing up, but in amongst that wheat, there are weeds. And it seems like God, or the landowner, is letting them just grow up together. And if we look around the church, what we can see is a bunch of people like, no, I'm really trying to be good. Like, I'm trying really, really hard to be good. But people next to me in Mass, the people in my school or wherever they are, it doesn't seem like they're trying to be good. And does it even make a difference? Like, I'm really working hard at this. They're not working hard at this, but it seems like we get the same thing. So does my decision make a difference at all? Does anyone notice? Does anyone care? Does it make a difference? And what we realize is that God responds to that question. If you ever had that question, like, yes, I want to live a life that's changed because I'm grateful for your grace. But what does my little life have to do with anything? I don't know if we realize this often enough, that your decisions of what you do with your life actually have the ability to change the world. The decisions of what you do with your life have the ability to change the world. Now, the reality is, amen. The reality is, I think sometimes we know that, but sometimes we don't like it. Like, I know, but I don't want that kind of responsibility. Like, I know that I could help people around me, but I don't want to have to do this. Did anyone here see Man of Steel this last summer? Okay, so good. I really enjoyed. I quite liked it. Quite liked it very much indeed. But at one point, if you know the movie, what happens is, here's Kal-El, aka Superman, for those of you who don't know. Kal-El, Superman, is talking to his father, whose name's Jor-El, in case some of you don't know. And at one point, Lois Lane is like hurtling to Earth in this little escape space shuttle thing, but she's about to die. And so is the rest of the planet, because these Kryptonians are running amok on planet Earth, and they're killing everybody. And Jor-El, the father, says to Kal-El, Superman, the son, about Lois Lane, "You can save her." And then he says, "You can save them all." And Superman says, "Oh, seriously? I just want a sandwich. I was just gonna have some, put some Fritos on top and a little crunch with my," fine. That's not what Superman says. Jor-El says, "You can save her. You can save them all." I don't know if you noticed this in the movie. It's hard not to notice after the father says, "You can save them all." Superman goes like this. Oh. I don't know if that's a coincidence. I mean, instead of taking off right away, he's like, "Oh, catch the symbolism," and then goes and saves everybody. The reality is, you have more influence than you think, but we think no, but how can I can't save everybody. And that's Superman, that's a comic book. In fact, I mean, then they spent the next hour destroying the city of Metropolis. I don't know how many thousands of people died in that battle. I can't save them all. And we can get really discouraged about the limit of influence we have. There's a story years ago I remember hearing about what happened was there was this ocean, one of the oceans, tide had come in and the tide had gone out. When the tide went out, it had brought in all these starfish. Starfish are living things. And when the tide went out, the starfish were all there scattered around the shore. And there's so many, as far as you could see, there's just starfish. And there's this little boy who didn't want the starfish to die. So what he was doing is he's walking along the shore of the beach, and he's picking up a starfish and throwing it into the water, and picking up a starfish and throwing it in the water. But there's so many that this older man walked up to him and said, "That's ridiculous. What are you trying to do? There's no way that you can save all of these starfish. There is no way that you can make a difference. And look at all these starfish. You're only one person. What kind of difference could you make?" And the little boy bends down, he picks up a starfish, and he says, "Makes a difference to this one," and throws it in the water. You can say, you have the ability to change the world, to do something. God notices, God cares. But it seems so limited. But here, you can change the world. Mother Teresa was once asked, remember Mother Teresa of Calcutta? Remember that lady? Oh, yeah, she's kind of awesome. So at one point, Mother Teresa was asked, if you could change one thing about the church, what would it be? And that's a pretty good question. I mean, here's Mother Teresa who sees, she got the inside look, the inside scoop on the weeds and the wheat in the Catholic Church. If you could change one thing in the church, one thing in the world, Mother Teresa, what would it be? You can think of all the different things that she could maybe have answered, all the things she could have changed. Mother Teresa said, if I could change one thing in the church, it would be me. Mother Teresa didn't set out to change the world. She set out to let Jesus change her. This is the key, you guys. If I want to make a difference, then I have to let Jesus be the Lord of my life. I have to be willing to let Jesus change me. It's one of the hardest things any of us could ever do. I can change someone else. I can look at someone and say, "Oh my gosh, here's all the things you need to change in your life." But if I look at myself, it's yeah, but I have a reason I have these things in my life. I have a reason why I can't change. But to realize that if you were to let Jesus change you, the difference that would make. Every single saint who's ever lived, the reason that they changed the world is because they let Jesus change them. In a really practical way, here's what I mean. Really coming to the end of this, in a really practical way. They let Jesus determine for them who their friends were. They let Jesus determine what kind of TV shows they watched. They let the church, body of Christ on earth, determine for them, what kind of movies do you watch? What kind of music do you listen to? What kind of conversation do you have? I mean, here's the thing. Following Jesus is not just about like, I really feel it right now. Wait, I don't think I have a lot of faith. Okay, I'm good. That's not what it is to have faith. To have faith means, to belong to Jesus means, he gets to tell me what I get to watch and what I don't get to watch. What I get to listen to, what I don't get to listen to. Who I get to hang out with and who I don't get to hang out with. Jesus gets to determine all of these things. And that's what makes the difference. Nothing else. Not emotion. Not getting a good feeling. But ultimately this question. Does following Jesus, and you can ask yourself this question right now in this place. Has following Jesus in the last year, has it changed how I spend my time at all? Is my being Catholic, is my being a disciple of Jesus, is my being a friend of Jesus, is my being noticed by Christ, being chosen by Jesus, has that determined in any way how I spend my time? Because the reality is, think of any saint who's ever lived in the last 2,000 years of the church. The reason why they made a difference in their world is because of that one question. They let Jesus determine how they spent their time. They let God determine how they spent their days. No, they were all busy. We're all busy. Every single one of us. The question is not, are you busy? Do you have some free time for Jesus? No. It's, you're busy. Are you willing to change your schedule in order to get closer to Christ? That is the question I want to leave everyone here with this morning. Now, if I'm going to have a love for God, if I'm going to belong to him, question is this, it's not, are you busy? You already are. It's this, am I willing to change my schedule in order to get closer to Jesus? Because that's what a disciple does. I can look at my last week, my last month, and say, have there been any times where I've changed my schedule to get closer to Jesus? If I haven't, I'm not really a disciple of Jesus. Am I willing to change my schedule in order to get closer to Christ? If I don't, I'm not his disciple, no matter how good I am. And if I do, then you are his disciple, no matter how much you struggle. If you're willing to change your schedule to get closer to Jesus, even if you struggle, you are his. You struggle as his. Years ago, there was this man who was asked, like, what are some, I know you keep telling us to love God, but what's a practical way to love God? I mean, give us some tangible things. And this guy responded, he said, there's nothing more practical than loving God. Because what you love will determine what gets you out of bed every morning. What you love will determine what you do with your day. What you love will determine what kind of books you read. It'll determine what kind of movies you watch. What you love will determine the kind of friends that you choose to spend your time with. Love determines everything. What you really love will always determine what you choose to do with your day. So he said, so fall in love with God. Stay in love with God. And that will decide everything.